Fatherland videos. We have a mythology read tonight. You know I won't go let y'all down. Very, very trying, long, dangerous, smoky, hot, exhausting, thirst-driven day. It was a thirsty day for me. Yeah, it was a challenging day. Very productive, successful day, but challenging. I think y'all saw the videos I uploaded with she been a handful today. I was so busy with this wild brush fire. I'll leave it at that. I uploaded the video from the news company about it. I'm not sure the video uploaded told the whole truth, but I'll just say that about it. And that was something that was smoky and choking and hot, and I wasn't allowed to help out with it, but just going out there to see if I can help and riding around from one spot. The firefighters told me to go to the other side to go see if they needed some help on the other side, and they didn't need my help either over there. It was I ain't gonna put them on blast. Well, I guess I gotta kind of say why my help wasn't needed. It was at a firefighters training facility area where they train firemen. It's where the wild brush fire broke out. So therefore I wasn't needed, because not only did they have professionals, they had trainees, they had all the equipment, and my help wasn't needed because it was at the firemen's training site. So I'll leave it there, and still driving around and waiting around a little while to make sure it was still challenging by itself. And then met up with a guy on a dirt bike, and we've been riding around and doing some stuff and getting back and dealing with baby girl. She's still in her puppy phase and peeing and doodling. It's been a challenging day, but very successful. Our side of town didn't burn down. It could have. And heroes and heroines, epic tales. This book is presented by Maria Tartar, Pine Tree Publishing. We're reading the story of Terrius Persine and Philomela on page 221. Let me make sure we're reading this, y'all, because I'm tired. This one seemed too long. We're not reading this tonight, y'all. It's too long. Let's see if we can find a smaller one. Still got a full day ahead of us. We'll read this one, The Legend of Chi Niu. That sounds Japanese or Chinese or Asian or something. Let me see. 261. Chinese mythology. Heroes and Heroines, Myths and Tales by Maria Tartar. Fame Tree Publishing. The Legend of Tichi Nui. What we gonna say? Techi Nui. We gonna say Tichi Nui. On page 260. In the quaint commentary accompanying the text of the holy book of Laetisu called Kan Pian may be found a little story so old that the name of the one who first told it has been forgotten for 1,000 years, yet so beautiful that it lives and still in the memory of 400 millions of people, like a prayer that, once learned, is forever remembered. The Chinese writer makes no mention of any city nor any province, although even in a relation of the most ancient traditions, such a mission is rare. We are only told that the name of the hero of the legend was Tong Yang, and that he lived in the years of the great dynasty of Han, some 20 centuries ago. Tong Yang's mother had died while he was yet an infant, and when he became a youth of 19 years, his father also passed away, leaving him utterly alone in the world and without resources of any sort. For being a very poor man, Tong's father had put himself to great straits to educate the lad, and had not been able to lay by even 1 copper coin of his earnings, and Tong lamented greatly to find himself so destitute that he could not honor the memory of that good father by having customary rites or burial performed, and a cavern tomb erected upon a propitious site. The poor only are friends of the poor, and among all of those whom Tong knew, there was none one able to assist him in deferring the expenses of the funeral. In one way only could the youth obtain money, by selling himself as a slave to some rich cultivator, and this he at last decided to do. In vain his friends did their uttermost to dissuade him and not to propose. They attempt to delay the accomplishment of his sacrifice by begrudging promises of future aid. Tong only replied that he would sell his freedom 100 times, if he were possible, rather than suffer his father's memory to remain unhonored even for a brief season. And furthermore, confiding in his youth and strength, he determined to put a high price upon his servitude, a price which would enable him to build a handsome tomb, but which it would be well nigh impossible for him ever to repay. According, he repaired he repaired to the broad public place where slaves and debtors were exposed for sale, and seating himself upon a bench of stone, having affixed to his shoulders a placard inscribed with the terms of his servitude and the list of the qualifications as a laborer. Many who read the characters upon the placard smiled disdainfully at the price asked and passed on without a word. Others lingered only to question him out of simple curiosity. Some commended him with hollow praise. Some openly mocked his unselfishness and laughed at his childish piety. Thus many hours wearily passed, and Tong had almost despaired in finding a master when there rode up a high official of the province, a grave and handsome man, lord of 1,000 slaves and owner of a vast estates. Riding in his Tartar horse, the official halted to read the placard and to consider the value of the slave. He did not smile or advise or ask any questions, but having observed the price asked and the fine, strong limbs of the youth, purchased him without further ado, merely ordering his attendant to pay the sum and to see the necessary papers were made out. Thus Tong found himself enabled to fulfill the wish of his heart and to have a monument built, although of small size, was destined to delight the eyes of who beheld it, being designed by cunning artists and executed by skillful sculptors. And while it was yet designed only, the pious rites were performed. The silver coin was placed in the mouth of the dead. The white lanterns were hung at the door. The holy prayers were recited, and the paper shapes of all things the departed might need in the land of Genie were consumed in consecrated fire. And after the geomancers and the necromancers had chosen a burial spot which no unlucky star could shine upon, a place of rest which no demon or dragon might ever disturb, the beautiful child was built. Then was the phantom money strewn along the way. The funeral procession departed from the dwelling of the dead, and with prayers and lamentation, the mortal remains of Tong's good father were borne to the tomb. Then Tong entered as a slave into the service of his purchaser, who allotted him a little hut to dwell in, and thither Tong carried with him those wooden tablets bearing the ancestral names before which fellow piety must delay burning the incense of prayer and perform the tender duties of family worship. Thrice had spring perfumed the breast of the land with flowers, and thrice had been celebrated the festival of the dead, which is called Siu Fanti. The thrice had Tong swept and garnished his father's tomb, and presented his fivefold offerings of fruits and meats. The period of mourning had passed, yet he had not ceased to mourn for his parent. The years revolved with their moons, bringing him no hour of joy, no day of happy rest, yet never lamented his servitude or failed to perform the rites of the ancestral worship, until at last the fever of the rich rice field laid strong hold upon him, and he could not arise from his couch, and his fellow laborers thought him destined to die. There was no one to wait upon him, no one to care for his needs, insomuch as slaves and servants were wholly busy with the duties of the household or the labor of the fields, all departing to toil sunrise and returning weary only after the sundown. Now while the sick youth slumbered, the fitful slumber of exhaustion only sultry noon, he dreamed that a strange and beautiful woman stood by him and bent above him and touched his forehead with the long, fine fingers of her shapely hands. At her cool touch, a weird sweet shock passed through him, and all his veins tingled as if thrilled by a new life. Opening his eyes in wonder, he saw a very bending over him, the charming being whom he had dreamed, and he knew that her lid had really caressed his throbbing forehead. But the flame of the fever was gone. A delicious coolness now penetrated every fiber of his body, and the thrill of which he had dreamed still tinkled in his blood like a great joy. Even at the same moment, the eyes of the gentle visitor met his own, and he saw they were singularly beautiful and shone like splendid black jewels on the brows curved like the wings of the swallow. Yet their calm gaze seemed to pass through him as light through crystal, and a vague awe came upon him, so that the question which had risen to his lips found no utterance. Then she stood still, caressing him, smiled, and said, I have come to restore thy strength and to be thy wife. Arise and worship me. Her clear voice had tones melodious as birds' song, but in her gaze there was an imperious power which Tom felt he dared not resist. Rising from his couch, he was astounded to find his strength wholly restored, but the cool, slender hand which held his led him away so swiftly that he had little time for amazement. He would have given years of existence for courage to speak of his misery, to declare his utter inability to maintain a wife, but something irresistible in the long, dark eyes of the companion forbade him to speak, and as though in the inmost thought had been discerned by the wondrous gaze, she said to him in the same clear voice, I will provide. Then shame made him blush at thought of his wretched aspect and tattered apparel, but he observed that she also was poorly attired, like a woman of the people, wearing no ornament of any sort, not even shoes upon her feet. And before he had yet spoken to her, they came before ancestral tablets, and there she knelt with him and prayed, and pledged him in a cup of wine, brought he knew not from whence, and together they worshipped heaven and earth. Thus she became his wife. A mysterious marriage is seen, for neither on that day nor at future time could Tongue venture to ask his wife the name of her family, or the place whence she came, and he could not answer of any curious questions which his fellow laborers put him concerning her, and she moreover never uttered a word about herself, except so that her name was Tich. But although Tom had such awe of her that while her eyes were upon him, he was on high, having no will of his own. He loved her unspeakably. He loved her unspeakably, and the thought of his serfdom ceased to weigh upon him from the hour of his marriage. Although magic, the little dwelling had become transformed into misery, was masked with charming papers, devices, with dainty decorations created out of nothing but that pretty jugglery of which woman only knows the secret. Each morning at dawn, the young husband found a well-prepared and ample repast awaiting him, and each evening also upon his return. But the wife all day sat at her loom, weaving silk after a fashion unlike anything which had ever been seen before in that province. For as she wove, the silk flowed from the loom like a slow current of glossy gold, bearing upon the undulation strange forms of violet and crimson and jewel green, shapes of ghostly horsemen riding upon horses, and the phantom chariots dragon drawn, and the standards of trailing cloud, In every dragon's beard glimmered the mystic pearl, and every rider's helmet sparkled the gem of rank. And each day teach would have weave a great piece of such figured silk, and the fame of the weaving spread abroad from far and near. The people thronged to see the marvelous work, and the silk merchants of the great cities heard of it, and they sent messengers to teach, asking her that she would weave for them and to teach them her secret. Then she wore for them as they desired, in return for silver cubes which they brought her. But when they prayed to her to teach them, she laughed and said, "Assuredly, I could never teach you, for no one among you has fingers like mine." And indeed no man could discern her fingers when she wove, and more than he might belong the wings of the bee vibrating in swift flight. The seasons passed, and Tong never knew want, so well did his beautiful wife fulfill her promise. "I will provide." And the cubes of the bright silver brought by the silk merchants were piled up high and higher in the great cavern chest which Teach had bought for the storage of the household goods. One morning, at last, when Tong had finished his repast, was about to depart to the fields, Teach unexpectedly bade him remain, and opened the great chest she took out of it, and gave him a document written in the official characters called Li Shu. And Tong, looking at it, cried out and leaped in his joy, for it was the certificate of the manumission. Tichi had secretly purchased her husband's freedom with the price of the wondrous silks. "Thou shalt not labor no more, any master," she said, "but for thine own sake only. And I have also brought this dwelling, which therein, and the tea fields to the south, and the mulberry groves hard by, all of which are thine." Then Thong, beside himself for gratefulness, would have prostrated himself in worship before her, but that she would not suffer it. Thus he made free, and prosperity came to him with freedom, and whatsoever he gave to the sacred earth was returned to him in cup. And his servants loved him and blessed the beautiful Tichi, so silent and yet so kindly to all about her. But the silk loom soon remained untouched, for Tichi gave birth to a son, a boy so beautiful that Tong wept with delight when he looked upon him. And thereafter the wife devoted herself wholly to the care of the child. Now it soon became manifest that the boy was not less wonderful than his wonderful mother. In the third month of his age he could speak. In the 7th month he could repeat by heart the proverbs of the sages and recite the holy prayers. Before the 11th month he could use his writing brush with behold him and converse with him. And they marveled at the charm of the child and the wisdom of what he said. And they blessed Tong, saying, "Surely this son of thine is a gift from the Master of Heaven, a sign of the immortals love thee. May thine eyes behold 100 happy summers." It was in the period of the 11th moon the flowers had passed away, and the perfume of the summer had flown, and the winds of the growing chill, and in Tong's home the evening fires were lighted. Long the husband and wife sat in the mellow glow, he speaking much of the hopes and joys, and of his son that was to be so grand a man, and of many paternal projects, while she, speaking little, listened to his words, and often turned her wonderful eyes upon him with an answering smile. Never had she seemed so beautiful, and Tong, watching her face, marked not only the night wan, nor how the fire sank low, nor how the wind sang in the leafless trees without. All suddenly Tichi arose without speaking, and took his hand in hers, and led him gently, as a strange wedding morning, to a cradle where the boy slumbered, faintly smiling in the dreams. And in that moment there came upon Thong the same strange fear that he knew Tichi's eyes had first met his own, the vague fear that love and trust had come, but never wholly cast out, like unto the fear of the gods. And unknowingly, like one yielding to the pressure of mighty invisible hands, he bowed himself low before her, kneeling as to divinity. Now, when he lifted his eyes again to her face, he closed them forthwith in awe, for she towered before him, taller than any mortal woman, and there was a glow about her as of sunbeams, and the light of her limbs shone through her garments. But her sweet voice came to him with all tenderness of the hours, saying, Lo, my beloved, the moment has come in which I must forsake thee, for I have never of mortal born, and the invisible may incarnate themselves for time only. Yet I leave with thee the pledge of our love, this fair son, who shall ever be so thee as faithful and as fond as thou thyself hast been. Know, my beloved, that I have sent to thee by the Master of Heaven in reward of the filial piety, and I must now return to the glory of his house. I am the goddess Exeniu. Even as she ceased to speak, the great glow floated, and tongue reopened. His eyes knew that she had passed away forever, mysteriously as have passed the winds of heaven, irrevocably as the light of a flame blown out. Yet all the doors were barred, all the windows unopened. Still the child slept, smiling in his sleep. Outside the darkness was breaking, the sky was brightening swiftly. The night was past, and the splendid majesty the east threw upon his gates of gold from the coming of the sun, and illuminated the glory of his coming. The vapors of morning wrought themselves into the marvelous shapes of the shifting color, into forms weirdly beautiful as the silken dreams woven of the loom Chinil.